looking at the man born blind in John chapter 9. I didn't finish, I've never really finished any of the signs that we've looked at, but this one particularly, I didn't get through a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about. So I do want to pick up, and I'll try to remember where we left off. At least I kind of made a notation in my notes. We may revisit some of the things that we talked about, but hopefully we'll kind of remember some of the things we talked about last week. But I do want to continue looking at this because there's some other things I think we can learn from it. But I want to read it again. It's found in John chapter 9, beginning in verse 1. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said these things, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." Others said, "No, but he's like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." So they said to him, "How were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked him, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He said, "Whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" And they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and would you teach us?" So they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." This is a fascinating story. Again, one of the signs that John records for us as he is trying to make it known to all those who are going to read this story later that Jesus is the Son of God. We kind of mentioned it last week, but why is this an amazing story in your opinion?
It fulfilled prophecy, didn't it? That the blind would see.
Yes?
I like the way the blind man just comes back at the leaders,
Right. I imagine most of us would probably do the same thing. If we're questioned about, I don't know if, I hope nothing like this ever happens to any one of us, but if something drastic happens to us, maybe health-wise, maybe our sight, our hearing, I don't know, something, and then it came back because of something like this, I think we would all be strongly convicted about whoever it was that was able to make me see. I would be, I don't know, I would be singing his praises. I would be saying, I don't know what I don't know what kind of magician he is, but he made me see again.
that'd be like somebody going to the nursing home and you've had a crippled person laying all wadded up in the bed and they haven't been able to get up for years, and all of a sudden somebody pray over them or ask God to help them, and then they were able to get up and walk normally. I mean, you would know it was God.
You would know.
Yeah.
You would have people that would question it. If I didn't see it, I would probably question it as well.
But a lot of people seen him. They were going in and out of that gate, going to that special pool, and
Yeah.
it was years of seeing him crippled, not being able to see anything.
So it says in verse 20, his parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he now sees, we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age." We don't know what his age is, but what does that phrase mean, he is of age? What would that be? Okay, old enough to speak for himself, gave him responsibility, knew right from wrong.
Jason,
Yes, ma'am.
what amazes me is his parents almost denied who he was. I mean, that's the way I see it, They said, "Yeah, that's my son, ask him." But it's like they didn't want to take any part in Jesus restoring his sight. I mean,
Why
am I
didn't?
off here?
No, why didn't they?
Huh?
Why didn't they?
They
They were scared of the Pharisees, right? It says his parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So fear, we've talked about this in a lot of the signs that we've talked about. Fear plays a major factor in keeping us from doing some of the things that we know that we need to do, right? Fear can play a major factor in us recognizing that God has done things that maybe we can't understand, but we're fearful of it. People may say I'm a kook. I don't want to be called a kook, right? Fear certainly kept these parents from maybe even backing up their kid. Hey, he's of age. So reading, I don't know, I didn't do a deep dig, a lot of research, but I just kind of briefly, what does this mean, he's of age? In the Jewish custom, of age meant he was at least 13 years old or older. So he's at least 13 years old. My opinion, he's much older than this. I don't know that parents would leave their 13-year-old just at the gate to be begging and not care about them. Maybe they would. As a parent, I wouldn't leave my 13-year-old out just to beg for stuff. But times are different. Yes, ma'am.
That makes me wonder, why would they, if he was their son, why would they put him out there to beg? You know,
Why didn't they-
families were maybe different back then. You know,
Yep.
I wouldn't let my child sit at the gate and beg even if it wasn't me.
They might have been gaining profit from him begging, maybe.
Maybe. Maybe he is old enough that he's allowed to fend for himself. That could be, that's kind of my opinion. My opinion is he's older than 13. My opinion, he's older than 20. And he is now an adult, and maybe some things transpired between him and his parents just said, we're done dealing with you.
Well, they could have physically been where they couldn't provide anymore.
Maybe so.
You know,
Maybe so. Nevertheless, this man's been blind for a long time, right? He's been blind from birth for a long time, right? So we kind of talked about, I do want to mention this again, what we talked about, what scientists call synaptogenesis. I just think it's interesting, and I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't. 42 days after conception, a baby's brain forms the first neuron. At birth, that same baby will have approximately 86 billion brain cells. That's a big number. As the newborn experiences new sights and sounds, it begins to form synapses in its cerebral cortex. At 6 months, each cell, how many cells? 86 billion. Each cell has approximately 18,000 connections. 18,000 times 86 billion is a great big old number. This process is called synaptogenesis. Now, millions of neurons are firing across neural pathways every second of every day. In babies, this happens at about 225 times the rate of a normal adult. At birth, a baby's eyesight is about 2200. Normal eyesight is 20/20. 2200 is legally blind. They can't focus on anything farther than 12 inches away. But at about 8 months, their visual acuity, color vision, and depth perception take shape where they can distinguish images just like an adult. Vision is wired between birth and 18 months. Synaptogenesis, that what we just talked about with that great big number, peaks at about 3 months. Now, we mentioned this last week. If you were to put a patch over the eye of a newborn baby and leave it there for the first few years of its life, it would be blind in that eye for the rest of its life, even if there were no physical deformities, because it would not have the ability to have that synaptogenesis, where it forms those visual images in its visual cortex. Doctors would have called this man in John chapter 9, called his condition irreversible, because he never had any images from birth to where he was. We had talked about last week, if you were to close your eyes and I would say like the word pet or the word car, you would have an image that would pop into your mind of what it would be. Your image would be different than my image, but we would have images because we've seen those things, and it's hardwired, it's formed inside our brain. This man has no images, right? Never seen a sunset, never seen his parents, never seen himself, right? Never seen the food that he's put in his mouth, okay? So this to me, again, all of Jesus' signs, all of Jesus' miracles are incredible. But this one just kind of takes on a little different meaning. I mentioned this last week too. It's almost like we've stair-stepped from the first sign to now. They've, in my human estimation, they've progressively gotten maybe a little bit harder, a little bit harder. Now we've reached, Jesus is now healing a man who has been born blind, okay? I think this is where we where we got to last week. But in verse 2, his disciples asked Jesus a question. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And we were kind of talking about why questions that we have in our life. Why do things happen to us?
To stick to the blind perspective, I find it interesting that the very blind man who actually did get his sight from Jesus, he can actually see Jesus as the Messiah, as the Christ, where the people who have the sight are too blind that even as the miracle is in front of them and there's confirmation of that miracle, they're too blind to see Jesus as the Christ. What I also find interesting is that essentially the Pharisees or the Jews have lie on their side. They don't believe the truth. And to support that lie, they have to use intimidation and they have to use force to maintain that lie, and they have to subdue the truth to make sure that the truth doesn't get unleashed. And if you unleash it, will kill you. Will kill the Messiah, will kill you for representing the truth. That they have to use force to push down the truth.
I think that is a very astute observation. In fact, that's like 2 paragraphs down in my notes. So, yeah, but isn't he right? I mean, the Pharisees have all of this learning, all this knowledge. They've memorized all the prophecies that are leading up to the coming Messiah, yet they're so blind. And doesn't Jesus even talk about it at the end of the chapter? Some of the Pharisees heard him and said, Are we the blind ones? Jesus said, you said it. Can you see can you see what's going on? No, you can't see because you have blinded yourself to it, right? You've blinded yourself to it. So we kind of mentioned, I guess I need to mention it again because I think it bodes well for us to understand that we may not always get the answers to our why questions. Why did these things happen to us? We read from Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Fame of Faith, beginning in verse 32, and it says, "And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, or Barak, or Samson, or Jephthah, or of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received their dead by resurrection." We kind of mentioned, we remember these stories, right? The stories that are recorded for us in the Old Testament, how God helped these people overcome tremendous obstacles and certainly situations where there's no way they could overcome these things. But God was there to give them the strength or to bring them through those difficult things. But the chapter doesn't stop right there, right? Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and in holes in the ground. Were only half of those that we talk about, were only half of those in the will of God, or were all of them in the will of God? Why did God allow those people to be sawn in two? Why did he allow those people to be tortured? Why did he allow those people to be stoned to death? We don't know the answer. But in all of it, what we have to understand is God was glorified in those situations. And in the situations that we face, that we may not know the answer to, situations that we would never wish on our worst enemy that might happen to us, we have to look and we have to be able to have the faith that says whatever is going through, whatever is causing me to go through this, God is going to be glorified. These parents had to be devastated when their child, when he gets old enough and they realize he can't see. That would be a devastating. I don't know how I would deal with if any of my kids or grandkids couldn't see. I don't know how I would deal with it. it would be really hard, it'd be really tough to try to teach that child how to survive. Can it be done? Sure. People do it all the time. In my opinion, it would be really hard to try to teach that child how you're going to survive not being able to see anything that's ever out in front of you.
Well, you send them to the school for the blind.
Right, but at first,
Back then,
they had no schools for the blind, right? So, I mean, these parents, maybe they blamed themselves. So maybe the question that the disciples ask isn't so far off. Hey, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born this way? Maybe the parents even asked that themselves. What did we do wrong? Where did we go wrong? Maybe you've asked that of yourself. Where did I go wrong? I've asked that numerous times. Where did I go wrong when situations have presented themselves that have been challenging? They've been tough to overcome. JJ took his son Jasper on a day trip. They were going to go out in the hills of Texas, and they were going to go dune buggy riding, which people do that. There's places out there where even people from here will load up trailers, and they'll take their four-wheelers and those big, huge buggies that you see, and they'll go riding, and they've got trails. So JJ and Jasper were going to go and make a day of it. They were just going to go ride their dune buggy and have a great time. Until tragedy struck. When JJ, who's the dad, is driving, hits a hill, a mound, or something, and doesn't hit it just right, and it flips the buggy. And his son is killed in the accident. As a father or mother, how would you feel at that moment? Would you feel like it's your fault? Would you feel like I'm responsible for the death of my son? Absolutely. Now imagine having to call your wife and tell her what's happened. That would be tough, right? JJ says, before he calls his wife to give her the news, he prays to God. He says, I need God to give me the words that's going to help me to break this terrible news to my wife. This is what he says. Honey, I have some really bad news, but before I tell you, I want you to think about everything that you know that is good about God. What would you say? What's good about God? I've got bad news to tell you. I say, hey, I really got some bad news, but I want you to think about everything that you know that is good about God. What would you say?
Everything's good about God.
Okay, specifically. Everything is good about God. What would you say specifically?
He answers our prayers.
He answers our prayers.
He loves us and wants us all to be saved.
He loves us unconditionally, no matter what. And he desires all of us to be saved.
He never leaves you.
He never leaves you. Never. We might leave him. He never leaves us. Come on, you guys are scholars. You guys are you're the brainchild in this.
He gave his son for us.
He gave his son for us.
He gives us a new home.
Gives us a new home. He's got it waiting for us, right?
1 Corinthians 10:13, you'll never put anything more on us than we can handle.
Never put more on us than that would be tough. One of my kids, maybe I'm responsible for the death of one of my kids. That would be some. God must think I can handle a lot of things if he's going to put that on me. But that's right. He's not going to put more on us than that we can handle. Think about those things. When tragedy strikes, think about all the things about God that you know are good. Some of the most important that we said, he loves us no matter what. He loves us. He will never leave us.
I'd say another important thing is he reigns on the just and the unjust. I mean, you don't know what you're going to have to bear in this world, and it's not that Jesus loves you any less
That's right.
because of what you have to go through. We don't understand the why,
We don't.
but God has a reason and a plan for everything.
And we have to have the faith. Our faith needs to be so strong that we have to remember that no matter what. Because quite frankly, we've been told that bad things are going to happen to us. In this life, this is a sin-filled world, right? Sin rules this world. We know bad things happen because sin is in the world, right? But Romans 8:37 says this: in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. We have to remember those things, right? We have to remember, as children of God, we are more than conquerors. Is there anybody that could play the victim card more than Joseph in the Bible?
Jesus.
Besides Jesus? Good point. But Jesus knew why he came to this earth. Joseph didn't know why these things were happening to him. Jesus didn't know why his brothers hated. Maybe he had an idea. He's kind of maybe parading things around his brothers. Maybe he's bragging a little bit too much. But even so, do you think you can make your brothers, your siblings so mad that they would want to kill you? I mean, I'm the oldest of my two brothers, and my mom says I tormented them pretty good when we were growing up. I really don't think they've ever wanted to kill me or sell me into slavery, right? That's what they did to Joseph. And he's in slavery, right? But he ends up making it pretty good, where he's ruling over the house of Potiphar, who is in charge of Pharaoh's army, until he gets falsely accused and thrown in prison. Why did that happen? God, why did that happen?
I think they even questioned why. Job would have questioned God, why me? What did I do? In his mind, he probably questioned God. Because he served him so faithfully.
Right.
And his wife, was telling him to curse God and die. She was real encouragement. Just curse God and die.
And sometimes we may think like we are serving God so faithfully. Why am I going through this? Why am I going through this? Did this man sin, or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus said it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Yes, sir.
So in James 1:2-4, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work, that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." So it makes me think of Job, where I really believe that those trials, that this is just my opinion, but I believe that God desired to bless Job twofold. And I believe that he had to go through the trials to receive the blessing, that he had to essentially clear himself out of his lack of faith to then be able to be more available for that gifting. And so I wonder sometimes if the trials are given to us to strengthen our faith. And what James is saying is we count it as joy, which I like that scripture, because when I get down in the moment, I can turn back to that and go, I have to remind myself to count it as joy that my son has died. Not that I'm glad that he is dead, but this is another testing of my faith. This is another exercise that will help me become stronger in my relationship with God. So it's just a reminder that even in the bad times, to count it as joy, because God is trying to have a greater relationship with us. That's how I interpret it anyway.
I think that's good. I think that's a great way to look at it, because if we believe those words in James, when we have trials that come our way, when tough times come, right? It says in one of the Corinthians that we're tested by fire, right? Why do refineries use fire they put the ore in the fire? Why do they do that? They do it to get rid of the impurities, right? When I was growing up, when I was a young fella, my grandfather thought that he was going to make it rich by buying a mine in just on the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado. So as a kid, it was great because we would get to go up in the summer times and spend time in the mountains in the cabin, and we'd get to go into the mine and play. Well, my grandfather squandered away a lot of money, not ever getting rich, on a silver mine, by the way. It was a silver mine. But it was fun as a kid to go in and, I mean, we could go in, I think it was, I don't know, it was several hundred yards in the mountain, but it was just cool. We could go in and we could take our little hammer and chisel, and we could chisel out some of the stuff, and then he would take us back to the shop, and we could throw it in the kiln, and we could take this big old huge rock that we chiseled out over the course of 3 or 4 days because we were little and we weren't able to use the big tools. But we could take that, put it in the kiln, and burn it down and get all of the impurities out and get this little bitty tiny piece of silver that he would, like we made tie tacks out of them or just little small things. But it was cool. But how did we get that silver? You had to put it through the fire, right? You had to put it through adversity so that you could get the pure silver that was there. Sometimes we go through those adversities so that pure faith can come out. Is it easy going through it? Absolutely not. Are we better on the other side? We can be if our faith holds up, right? Look at Joseph. Joseph was in a great position, but what if he wouldn't have? What if his faith would have lacked? What if he wouldn't have held up in those times of adversity? God would have certainly raised up somebody else, but it wouldn't have been Joseph, right?
Jason,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to tie one of my favorite groups of scriptures to what has already been said. In Romans 5, starting at 3, it says, "And not only that, but we also boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that He has given us." So you see where you start, you see what you get at the end. We're a work in progress.
Work in progress. May not ever be a finished product until we make it to heaven, right? But we got to keep the faith. Got to keep pushing forward, persevering, right? All right, let's move on, because if I don't move on, I'm going to run out of time again, and we're not going to do this next week. Verse 6, having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud. Why didn't Jesus just heal him right away? Of course, we won't know, but this is just an opinion.
The man had to have faith to do what Jesus told him to do.
Okay? What about most other times? How's Jesus healed most other times? Or Jesus done miracles most other times?
He was just praying to his Father.
He'd pray, or he touched, he spoke, it just happened, right? Just almost instantly. What does he do right here, though?
It's proof he did.
Say it again.
It's proof, like that he did. It's not only word.
Okay. Is there a human element involved in it? What does he say to the man? Go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Got to have obedience.
I wonder how he was able to get to the pool of Siloam to be washed.
So, good, with a little bit of research, it was I didn't write it down, but it was so many feet from where they were to the pool of Siloam, and he would have had to walk down. It's thousands of steps. I'm not sure how many. Thousands of steps going down to get to this pool. Can he see where he's going? No, he can't. Plus, he's got mud on his eyes now, right? It's also during the Feast of the Tabernacles, which was one of the feasts that people came from out of town to celebrate in Jerusalem. So, is there a lot of people there? Not very many people there. A lot of people there that he's going to have to navigate through blind to get to this place. Why didn't Jesus just say, you know what? Because the Pharisees are right, you're healed. Wouldn't that have been maybe more miraculous?
Well, it was also a big teaching moment for the Pharisees in that Jesus performed, he did work on the Sabbath, which was against their rules.
Which
He's teaching
aggravated them.
You better change your thinking. You're getting lost in the weeds. See the bigger picture here. That's one of the big things that was upsetting them. That he is breaking down all of these
Stereotypes or these things.
It's hard on them because all of their life and their ancestors' life, they've been taught that we only do things a certain way without ever questioning why is this important. And now here they are, this man, and they don't know what to do because they even say, how can this happen if this man is not from God? So, and then he does it on the Sabbath. How do they handle that? They should have believed that this man is God.
But who were the blind men?
Well, I'm with Kent. They didn't see the big picture, and Jesus is trying to tell them, I am the big picture. You have got to see me. And they I don't know if they didn't want to see him, they refused to see him, but in the end, they saw it.
So in John chapter 8, before this was just after the woman caught in adultery. In verse 12, Jesus again spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. In verse 5 of chapter 9, right before he spits on the ground, which on the Sabbath, it would have been illegal for him to spit on the ground and make mud. Just that little bit that's illegal for Jews to do on the Sabbath. But right before he does that, he says, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Does that ring a bell from anything in Scripture? From maybe a long time ago? Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 tells us that God said, let there be light. Let there be light. What does Jesus say he is? I am the light of the world. Was Jesus around when the world was created? Was Jesus part of the genesis of the world? Right? Now he's saying, I am the light of the world. Now he's going from... So to me, which one's more impressive? Genesis or now synaptogenesis? Both pretty impressive, right? But Jesus is saying, you Pharisees, you are the blind ones, right? I am the one that you have been waiting for, that you are waiting for, and you still can't see it. Well, you know what? It is the Sabbath day, but watch this. I'm fixing to show you, because it says the Pharisees didn't believe him because he was testifying of himself. Well, he said, you know what? I'll get somebody right here who can't see, and he can see, and he can testify for me. He can be my eyewitness. Right?
Isn't it funny, though, how they could say what was acceptable and what wasn't in the way of work? They had to get up and put clothes on. That required effort. But yet, and we can kind of pick and choose and say, oh, what you did is wrong. But it's just an opinion,
Yeah.
Did someone make up all the rules and say, oh, if you spit on the ground and make mud, then that's a no-no. But it's okay to get up and get dressed and maybe make yourself something to eat,
Or wash the dirt off my hands. I can wash the dirt off my hands, but I can't make that dirt. Yeah. All good points, right? What did the man have to do after he got the mud put on his eyes, though? He had to go and wash. He had to obey what God said. Do you think that he has had, for the whole course of his life, Do you think he's had to rely on people to help him out? Do you think maybe by Jesus doing this, saying, making the mud, saying, hey, I want you to go wash in the pool of Siloam, he's giving him his sight back, but he's also overcoming his willingness to rely on others. Now he is going to help him defeat that I don't have to rely on others now. I can do things for myself. I am strong enough, I am able to now live my life the way it should be lived. Right? I'm able to overcome these obstacles. We go through those trials, we go through things that we think we can't get through. On the other side, now we realize I can defeat those things. I can get through those difficulties. I can live now overcoming those things that I thought were holding me, that were hindering me, that were holding me back.
I know this is going backwards a little bit, and I apologize, but you're talking a lot about the why, and all the comments are great, and I agree. But I think to expand on it a little bit, whether the guy was in his 30s, 40s, or 20s, doesn't matter. I have to believe his parents prayed to God that he'd be able to see. Maybe he prayed many times that he'd be able to see. So regardless of whatever age he is, it said, or Jesus said, neither his parents nor he sinned, but it was done, or he was blind so that the works of God could be displayed. There's a lesson of patience there also. We may pray, and we obviously want instant responses. Certainly, we might think, well, 2 weeks is a long time to wait, so I've been patient, or 2 years
Right.
is a long time to wait. But 20, 30 years later, God's works were being displayed. So again, it's a reminder of patience, and things are done on God's side.
And we may not always get through those hard times tomorrow. We may not see the other side of that next week, next month, next year. It may be years down the road. The man that was healed after 38 years of being paralyzed. This man, we don't know how old he is, but I'm of the opinion he's older than 20, right? So again, patience, perseverance. Thank you guys for your attention. I really appreciate it.